How's it going? I'm Jay with Aquastar Distributors. Gonna talk to you about Dometic's VG4 or their JW vacuum generator. And we're gonna spend a little bit of time not only talking about, but showing you how to repair, maintain, or even replace your vacuum generator. So these come in a couple different configurations. If yours is permanently mounted on top of your holding tank and you're buying a replacement unit, you may have to change some of the fittings around for it to fit in there. But the first thing I want to talk about is if you're having a problem, you need to ask yourself, is this something I want to do myself? Nobody likes waste. Dometic has an incredible dealer distributor network where a technician can come out, service your unit, and do the replacement or whatever maintenance needs to be done on your behalf. But if this is something you're looking to do on your own, you can watch this video and get the job done. All right, so we're gonna tear down this VG4 vacuum generator. This one's brand new. Yours will not look like this. So you're gonna wanna use the appropriate personal protective equipment. But since this is new, I will not. Kind of do a talk and work here. So these are two #1 Phillips head screws that hold this cover in. Cover's a little expensive, so you don't want to break it. So once you get that cover off, we'll now take the motor off. The first thing I like to do when I remove the motor is pull out the shoulder bolt. This is the only time it's okay to utilize an impact gun on this. That's a 3/4 or a 19mm. I do this all the time. I have my tools all set up for this. It's probably best if this is your first time doing it to utilize hand tools. An electronic or battery-powered screwdriver is okay. The ugga-duggas on the impact gun will cause some problems. I'll show you where. Electronic screwdrivers are perfect for this. So there are 4 5/16 screws mounting this on. And the reason we took that shoulder bolt off is because sometimes the bellows can be in the way of those screws. You want to loosen them. So you'll pull the 4 screws off. Obviously, we would want to turn our power off prior to doing this. If your system is functioning properly, it's always nice to flush a couple of bowls of water down, clean everything out, and you can actually even put a little bit of bleach down there when we're going in to replace the rubber product. It's not going to do any long-term damage to any of the seals. This hardware is magnetic, all right? Excuse me, it's stainless steel, so it's not magnetic. If you drop it, gonna have a little bit of an issue. So just be careful of that. We'll edit this out nicely. Normally I use a needle nose. Now that we have the motor off, I'm gonna take the 8 screws that mount the pump top to the pump body. Those are also a 5/16. Always a good idea to get yourself a little cup, something you can put your hardware in, this way you don't lose it. Boats have an incredible way of almost consuming dropped hardware. All right, so now we'll remove that pump top and just be careful. A lot of times you'll see the bellows O-ring will be stuck on the top of the pump, or excuse me, the neck there of the pump top. All right, put that aside. You also have your body O-ring. We'll remove the bellows. You can see here, this is the newest version of Dometic's bellows. It has the black bushing. If your bellows doesn't have the gray shaft and the black bushing, definitely recommend replacing it out. The maintenance interval on this new bellows is 5 years. I was involved in the testing of that and it performed extremely well. This also has the newest version of Dometic's bellows clamps, okay? Now that we have that off, I'll take off all of my discharge fittings. These house our 2-inch duckbill valves. The J pumps use the 2-inch duckbill valves. There are 4. We always replace all 4 at the same time. Okay. This is the discharge fitting or hose adapter. Yours may have a different fitting on it. They're all a little different, but just be cautious when you take this apart. You'll see there's an O-ring on here, and that is available as a replacement item. We do include that in a couple of our rebuild kits. On this inlet elbow, it actually has that same exact O-ring, okay? That is a replacement item that we include in many of our rebuild kits. Next, we're gonna take a 7/16. Be very cautious when you remove these 4 bolts that mount the body to the tank top, especially if you have an older system. If you see a lot of corrosion around this hardware, I recommend utilizing a little bit of penetrating lubricant, and never, ever, ever use an impact gun to take these screws out. You can pull the threaded insert out of the tank, rendering the tank useless. They do not sell the tank top separately. You gotta buy a whole new tank, and right now, as of early spring of 2025, the tank's about $400. You can see here too, I'm being ultra cautious. I'm going around and I'm just loosening them by hand about 1 full turn. The reason I'm doing that is because if this is really cold or slightly corroded inside the hardware, you could potentially damage something. A lot of these plastic parts they can be hard to find. We do sell each individual component a la carte. We usually have them in stock. But you want to get this job done in a timely manner. We'll pull out our hardware. Then we'll take our pump body off of our tank top. Now, sometimes your duckbill valve may be inside of the pump body. That's fine. Inside the throat of this tank will be 2 2-inch duckbill valves, totaling 4. Additionally, the tank has our 213 O-ring. That's a different size than the fittings. That is a replacement item. We do sell these. It is included in a lot of the rebuild kits. So here's our first duckbill valve, something to be aware of. It doesn't matter if these are kind of facing side to side or the other way. They both have to face up. So gonna try and get a close up. This is the lower duckbill valve that is being retained by the duckbill valve collar, okay? So that's how that should look. Now this is brand new, it's never been used. We're seeing a lot of these systems. These came out in about 2005, 2007 is when they first fully came on the market. We're seeing quite a bit of issues with the systems having lots of uric acid and calcification. And the problem is that duckbill valve collar is almost concreted into the throat of that tank. I've personally ran into it where I just couldn't get it out. I tried utilizing acid to dissolve the mineral buildup, but I like to do things very quickly. Labor rates get pretty expensive. We got a lot of things going on here, and I can't be working on your system all day long. I try to keep my labor bills as reasonable as I can. So I came up with a pretty interesting technique. I take 2 deck screws, thread them into that duckbill valve collar, and then I'll utilize a claw hammer and pull that out. So that's a pretty good tip if yours is calcified and stuck in that tank. Now the problem is you are going to render that duckbill valve collar useless. However, it'll save you quite a bit of labor, right? Trying to fight that out of there, letting it sit overnight, dissolving the mineral buildup with an acidic base cleaner can be pretty time consuming, and it might not even work. So those duckbill valve collars we do have available on our website. We keep them in stock, and it is a replacement item. So the last item we're going to take off this unit is going to be the vacuum switch, all right? Just be cautious. This covers like 40, 50 bucks. Doesn't actually serve a purpose other than keeping people's hands out. But to remove the cover, you're going to pinch it on the long side. Sometimes you got to wiggle, push down a little bit. Again, pinch it on the long side and it'll pop up and reveal our vacuum switch. The vacuum switch is affixed to the tank with 4 number 2 Phillips head screws. And this would also be a good time just to very gently give them a 1/2 to 1/4 turn by hand. Again, I recommend hand tools. Ooh, swing and a miss. So once you have the screws off, you can remove that switch, all right? Something to be aware of, this switch only comes complete. It is not field serviceable. Not only is the diaphragm, but the spring and the actual switch portion are all things that can wear out over time. Generally speaking, we get about 6 to 12 years out of a vacuum switch, okay? Specifically on these VG4 vacuum generators, just be a little cautious when you install a new one. It does come with an oversized screw, not an oversized, but a larger screw. Personally, I like to reuse the screws that came from the factory. If I'm not having good luck with that, I will change to the new larger size screw. So when you're reassembling your vacuum generator, you can kind of do it any way you'd like. The last thing I took off was the vacuum switch. I'm gonna put that on first. Before we assemble this, if your tank is really dirty, you can clean it out. I do not recommend taking the 28 screws running around the outside of the tank apart. The seal that goes between the tank top and the tank bottom is available. It can be a little tricky to get this tank to properly seal up, and that'll cause quite a bit of headaches for you. So it doesn't matter which way you put your vacuum switch on. I really put it on anyway. I do not recommend utilizing an electronic device to reinstall these screws. I've done enough of them where I'm comfortable doing it, but you can strip out this tank top. That would not be a good decision. Okay, we have our switch reinstalled, and I'd like to talk about this switch. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but there is an A side and a B side to this vacuum switch. Power is always broken on the B side of this switch. If you're changing out your switch, I recommend taking a picture with your cell phone. We're very fortunate here in 2025. We have incredible devices that take unbelievable pictures. If that doesn't work, you can get like a silver colored Sharpie or a crayon, a piece of tape, and just make a little dot so you can see and rewire the switch up properly. Reassembling the vacuum generator, I'm gonna take my first 2-inch duckbill valve, drop that into the tank, and again, whether it's going this way or that way, doesn't matter. We'll then install our duckbill valve collar And then we'll take our second duckbill valve and install that on top of the duckbill valve collar. After that, we'll take our pump to tank O-ring. I usually put a little bit of silicone grease on them. If you're buying a minor rebuild kit from us, you do get that O-ring, and you also get a little packet of silicone grease, which is just enough to do that job. You're gonna put it back in that channel, and you're gonna ensure that that channel is nice and clean, free of debris, so we get a perfect seal. Now that we have that installed, I'm gonna grab my pump body. I'll put that on. I'll grab my hardware. I'll put a little bit of grease on my threads just to prevent any corrosion and be friendly to the next person that's gonna come into this system. We also wanna make sure that we're discharging in the proper direction. I personally like to go in a cross pattern. Now that we have our body installed, I'm gonna grab my bellows, our bellows chocks. I'm gonna ensure that I put the bellows chocks around that bellows in the proper orientation. Some customers will put them on top or they'll put them upside down. This is the only way that they go. I'll then take my bellows, ensure I have it properly aligned, press that into the pump body. I'll then take my brand new O-rings. I'll take a little bit of grease, grease those O-rings up, ensure the channel is clean and free from debris. I'll grab my bellows O-ring. We always change our O-rings. I'll do the same, lubricate that, put it in the channel. I'll grab my pump top, ensure it's clean, free from debris. Make sure I have it oriented in the proper direction and press down. See, I had a little resistance, and sometimes what can happen is the O-ring inside of here will jump out of place, and that'll cause a leak. So you want to be careful when you're installing that. So now I'll attempt again to get my O-ring installed properly. The grease really makes this much easier. There it was. Once I get that pressed in, I don't want to let go. Sometimes the bellows will push it out, and then when you re-push the pump top onto the bellows and the body, it'll bump your O-ring out of place. So one of the mistakes I also made was not properly having my tools ready. I've done this a couple of times, so. Now we have that. Once you get 2 screws in, you can let go. I'll grab the rest of my hardware. Now that we have that on, I'm gonna take my discharge fittings, got my duckbill valves, We want to change these duckbill valves about every 2 to 4 years or seasons, depending on use. If you're a heavy user, a full-time liveaboard, I do recommend changing those duckbill valves once a year. Just the heavy users, I find way more demanding. We want to keep our system running well, in good working order, and do preventative maintenance, not repairs. So, spec on these discharge fittings. Sometimes some of these tanks have a sticker that says half turned past hand tight. Now, in my experience, that's all relative. Here on a workbench, all I need to do is go firm snug like that. That is way more than enough. If you over tighten these, you can strip out the body. Yes, everything is available a la carte, but it is a little costly. So we want to get this done correctly the first time. Firm snug by hand is what I say. Now, if you're working and you're completely extended out, you don't have a lot of leverage, we would want to take, a channel locks and snug those fittings up. All right, we'll put our inlet elbow on. Good little trick when you're installing this motor. It's easier if the bellows is pointing, the eccentric is pointing down on an angle to get it to align to the bellows. So, get my hardware. And this is very realistic because I'm doing it backwards, and when you're working on your boat, you'll probably be in a less than ideal location or limited access. Just be careful, you don't want to strip out the aluminum plate. Sometimes if you're really having a ton of trouble, you can squeeze this pump top together. So I'm gonna over exaggerate, but you'll kind of make it a little bit narrower at the top by squeezing. That can be a good trick. Getting these 2 lower screws in can also be a little tricky. A needle nose might be your best friend, but I'm gonna try and do it without one. There we go. Now what do? I'll tell you what I do. Since I'm not working on my boat and I'm on a workbench, I'm gonna flip this thing upside down. So, needle nose probably your best option to get these in. Now that we have our motor back on, we can pop our switch cover on. We'll put our pump cover on. And we're done. Depending on how you've done this, you may want to test it. So in a couple of moments, I'll show you guys how we do that. So there's a great chef on YouTube named Jean-Pierre, and he has this French saying, mise en place, or something along those lines. And basically what that means is always have everything organized and ready to go for the next step. And I didn't follow that rule today because as I was cleaning up and organizing my workbench, getting ready for the next scene, I realized that I forgot to reinstall the shoulder bolt. So we'll pop that one in, and I have a little trick that I'll show you while I do that. What you may want to do is press down on the bellows to help align it, and that's one of the reasons why I had suggested turning the eccentric on that motor on a nice angle. You can use a channel locks or an adjustable to do that. And again, this is the only time you would want to use an impact gun. Give it an ugga-dugga or 2, and that's good. So, snug those up. And now we have the vacuum generator assembled. Stay tuned, we're gonna show you how we test this. So now we want to wet test the system. I'm going to utilize a vacuum tester gauge to actually check the vacuum on it. These pumps will not pull vacuum completely unless they're wet. I like to do at least a gallon, if not more, of water. Obviously, I'm here in a beautiful studio setting. I have some extra hoses that I'm using to discharge the water. If you're doing this at home or at the marina, be aware this pump will shoot water about 5, 6, 8 feet. They're pretty powerful pumps. So now I'm gonna turn on the vacuum pump. I have a power supply. Gonna suck about a gallon of water through the system. So now that we got the system wet, I'll temporarily shut my power. I'll remove my intake hose. We're gonna get a little bit of a dribble. Put this off camera. And now we're gonna test the system. Utilizing a vacuum tester gauge, whether it's a digital one or an analog one that you can purchase off our website, is definitely the best way to do this. We'll have a numerical reading as to where the pump is shutting off. Now, if you don't have one of these, you can utilize your hand with a rubber glove. I don't like to do that. It's pretty uncomfortable. You can also utilize a racquetball. So we'll let this build full vacuum. So we're generating vacuum. And now the pump has shut itself off. Once the pump shuts off, it's always gonna drop a little bit, okay? That's basically the duckbill valve settling in. But like I said, it's never gonna shut off unless you wet test the system. I can't tell you how important it is to do that. If you think you might have a leak, a nice little trick with that racquetball is you can connect it, put it on the inlet elbow, let it run, let it shut off, disconnect the power going to the motor. You can do that in various ways. You can shut your circuit breaker off, however you're doing it, and wait. Come back in an hour, 2 hours, and about 3 hours is a good time. So we've run the vacuum generator, we let it shut itself off, we've disconnected the power, and we've waited 3 hours. Now, when you come back to the system and you turn that power back on, if it doesn't run, that means there was no leak and all your work here is perfect. Now, spec on leak down time is a minimum of 3, recommended 8 hours. So that's pretty much a full, thorough overhaul of a J series or JW vacuum generator, a VG4, duckbill valves about every 2 to 4 years, a bellows every 5 years, motor about 10 to 15, and vacuum switch about 6 to 12. I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. If you think it brought you value, please make sure you buy your replacement parts from us. Spend a lot of time and investment into creating this content. And I don't want to see you guys get shorted buying aftermarket parts that don't work. We have lots of issues all day here with aftermarket parts. They don't work, they don't last, they're trash. Buy OEM Dometic stuff from Aquastar Distributors. Thanks.